1 on the morning of April the 26th, 1986. The world was seconds away from its worst ever nuclear accident. Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power station in the Soviet Union exploded. Five minutes later, a phone call, recorded at the time, was the first alert of a tragedy in the making. By morning, the physical devastation was revealed, but much worse was to come. The disaster at Chernobyl brought death and disease. It brought the very idea of nuclear power into question. And within the Soviet Union, the trauma of Chernobyl was so great that many see it as the first step in the breakup of the communist regime. This film tells the story, minute by minute, second by second, of the 1-hour countdown to tragedy. As seen through the eyes of the key actors in the drama, the workers who were accidentally led to their deaths, and the innocent bystanders who looked on. Based on documented evidence and eyewitness reports, it has been filmed on location inside the surviving areas of the Chernobyl nuclear power station. The control room at Chernobyl's reactor number 4. It's here that all the key decisions in the coming hour will be taken. The future of the reactor and the world beyond is in the hands of 3 men. At only 26, Leonid Toptonov is senior control engineer. His job is to control the enormous power in the reactor. Alexander Akimov is the shift foreman, the captain of the ship.
Ну что, все выспались? Поужинали нормально?
But tonight he is outranked. Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov is in charge. Dyatlov is one of the Soviet Union's top nuclear engineers. He's also a hard man operating in a harsh system. There is a further vital character, the newly commissioned reactor number 4 itself, one of the communist regime's proudest technological achievements. Tonight the control room is preparing for a safety test on the reactor.
Мощность упала почти до 500 мегаватт.
А что с ларом?
Я отключаю локальный автоматический регулятор мощности реактора.
But a fateful argument is brewing between the 2 senior engineers and Dyatlov about the level of power at which it is safe to begin the test.
Арден включился, но все равно мощность падает.
Продолжайте.
Что происходит? Мы же не должны опускаться ниже нормы, это 700 мегаватт. Это же небезопасно. Что я ему скажу?
Я ему сам скажу. Не надо мне ничего говорить. Я все знаю сам. Думать не твоя работа. Здесь я принимаю решение. Делай, что тебе говорят.
On this night, Chernobyl is harboring 2 deadly secrets. The first is a potentially fatal flaw in the reactor's design, which the engineers are unaware of. A flaw that makes it highly unstable when run at low power. The second secret concerns the man in charge. Anatoly Dyatlov's own history is scarred by the very technology he is seeking to dominate. Tonight, Dyatlov and the reactor will face each other in a battle of strength that will destroy them both.
Soon on Discovery.
31 minutes past midnight. The argument over the power level at which the safety test on Chernobyl's reactor number 4 can begin grows ever more serious.
Мы и так уже опустились ниже уровня безопасности в 700 мегаватт. Мощность падает очень быстро.
Единственное, что здесь нестабильно, так это работа твоих некомпетентных людей.
The test has been demanded by Russia's atomic energy authorities and stems from the Cold War fear of being attacked that still grips the Soviet Union. A few years before, the Israeli Air Force bombed an Iraqi nuclear reactor built by the Russians. Since then, Soviet scientists have demanded tests on their reactors to see what will happen if they come under enemy attack, and their power supply is knocked out. But Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov is deliberately ignoring top-level advice on how the test should be done. The guidelines state that the reactor's power should be between 700 and 1,000 megawatts when the test begins. Dyatlov wants to do the test at only 200 megawatts to preserve the cooling water that stops the reactor overheating. He believes there's little risk.
Unfortunately, that night there was not a single man in the control room that he saw as his equal. There really wasn't anyone there who was as strong a character or as professionally qualified whose opinion he would respect.
Реакторы не ошибаются, ошибаются люди. Давайте за работу.
Dyatlov is not in fact an unreasonable man. Rather, he is a creature of the communist system that has raised and promoted him. He was born a fisherman's son in Siberia and ran away from home at the age of 14. He's overcome these unpromising beginnings to rise through the ranks as an engineer. He is a party man who tries to follow the rule book, but he's aware that in the nuclear industry, the rule book and reality often don't match. To get things done, shortcuts and improvisation are sometimes the only answer. Winding the power down has led to it dropping too fast.
Что там у тебя?
Ну, мощность быстро падает.
Ты что натворил, идиот? Что ты наделал? Ты же мощность упустил! У тебя же руки из задницы растут! Да помоги ты ему!
Успокойся, успокойся, не суетись. Начинаем все сначала. Успокойся.
One mile away from Chernobyl is the dormitory town of Pripyat. Everyone who lives here works at the power station. Though they don't know it, all these people's destinies will be dictated by the events unfolding in control room number 4. Among them, soundly asleep, is Nikolai Fomin, the chief engineer of Chernobyl, who left the order for the safety test to be carried out. A few hundred yards away, Natasha Yevchenko is being kept awake by her 2-year-old son, Kirill. From her window, Natasha can see the lights of the nuclear power station where her husband, engineer Sasha Yevchenko, is working a routine night shift. As he passes through the kilometre-long turbine hall, Sasha's thinking not of work, but of the upcoming May Day holidays.
Чем-то этот вечер отличался, знаете, не так, как всегда.
There was something about that night, something unusual. For some reason, I got all dressed up. The weather was remarkable, very warm for spring. I went off to work in a terrific mood. But my wife said that all night our son Kirill was crying. She didn't sleep a wink.
Риба дуже маленька сьогодні, знаєш. Що дуже маленька. Каже, може...
Others are also awake, among them 2 fishermen. One, a Chernobyl maintenance man, casting for fish attracted by the power plant's warm waste waters. "24 minutes to 1. A new problem disturbs the concentration of the increasingly fraught operators.
выключен этот вой.
Уровень воды в барабан-сепараторах опасно низкий.
Давай соберись, это твоя работа.
Senior Unit Control Engineer Boris Stolyarchuk controls the flow of water through the reactor. He's all too used to alarms like this.
As for the water levels in the separator drums, it was always difficult to control them at low power. All the operators knew about it, so I didn't feel afraid. Then.
22 minutes to 1. The reactor has ground to a complete halt. Dyatlov makes a fateful decision.
Ты же уронил реактор! Имбецил ты долбанный! Ну давай, поднимай мощность! Выводи регулирующие стержни! Бегом!
To raise power after 12:30, the shift actually had to pull all the control rods out of the reactor. All the control rods. This was like cocking a gun.
Control rods are the accelerator and the brakes of the nuclear reactor. Below the 50-foot reactor lid are 1,661 uranium-filled fuel rods, which descend into the reactor core. The splitting of the uranium atoms releases enormous heat from the fuel rods, which turns water into steam. The steam drives the giant turbines which generate electricity. To control this power, 211 boron control rods are spread throughout the reactor core. If they're raised, power accelerates. If they're taken out altogether, the engineers lose their ability to apply the brakes. Yet that is exactly what Dyatlov tells his men to do.
Извините, Анатолий Степанович, но разве мы не должны остановить реактор? И так положено по инструкции.
Это верно, Анатолий Степанович. Это абсолютно верно. Если мы извлечем регулирующие стержни, управлять реактором нам после этого становится почти невозможно.
Как же испытания не проводить из-за таких кретинов, как вы? Испытание будет проведено сегодня. А тебе я скажу. Если ты не хочешь или не можешь выполнять приказания, я могу избавить тебя от этой необходимости. Ты меня понял? Да. Пошел вон! Трегуб, прими управление!
Начал. Осторожнее.
The men's revolt has failed. Tregub and Akimov power up the reactor. Within 5 minutes, they've got power rising again. Dyatlov has what he wants.
Не удалось поднять мощность реактора до 160 мегаватт. Ладно, передай управление Топтунову. Вперед, вперед. Только не уходи и постой с ним рядом.
The control room staff have every reason to fall in line. To be a nuclear engineer is a prestigious and well-paid job. They and their families live in the company town of Pripyat. The shops are well stocked, and there's a new school and amusement park.
Nobody wanted to lose the job, because losing the job would mean losing the flat in Pripyat and going elsewhere to probably some ghastly outpost in Siberia. The fear of getting sacked was the reason why they didn't speak out more effectively when they realized that they were doing something that could be very dangerous.
8 minutes to 1. Another alarm.
Уровень воды в барабан-сепараторе опасно низкий.
Разберись, там не маленький.
No one outside the control room knows about the argument going on there. For workers like Sasha Yevchenko, it's just another ordinary night.
Да, собственно, дел-то особых и не было.
There were no specific assignments for the shift.
И, собственно...
I'd already done one shift, and we all thought the reactor had been shut down. I thought the tests had been done on the earlier shift.
Что уже аппарат остановлен.
Outside the plant, the night is still. Three minutes past 1. After the failed revolt, the control room is now calm too. The men have got the reactor's power to the level Deputy Chief Engineer Dyatlov wants it for the test.
Анатолий Степанович, мы снова вышли на мощность в 200 мегаватт.
Очень хорошо. Начинайте испытание.
Но по регламенту начинать испытание я могу только при мощности в 700 мегаватт. Если вы хотите проводить испытания при уровне мощности в 200 мегаватт, я прошу вас занести это ваше распоряжение в оперативный журнал.
Да будет вам известно, что как заместитель главного инженера я имею полномочия изменить параметры проведения испытаний. И я ими воспользуюсь. Продолжайте испытания.
In the pump room, mechanic Valery Kademchuk is visited by his friend, foreman Valery Perevezhenko. Kademchuk has less than 20 minutes to live.
А я думал, ты сегодня не на смене.
А я специально пораньше из Киева вернулся.
Ну что, продал машину справа?
Ну, по крайней мере, с покупателем договорился.
Хорошо, поздравляю.
Как говорится, прощаю, Москвич-2140, здравствуйте, Жигули.
Отлично.
Я думаю, что, может быть, еще останется и на джинсы. Да ладно.
Ну ладно, будем видеться, пока.
Давай, до встречи.
Next on Perevezhenko's rounds is Sasha Yevchenko in the maintenance department. An innocent request will lead them back to the pump room near the reactor core.
Сань, мне нужно немного зеленой краски. Зачем? Мне надо обновить маркировку на трубоходе. А пойдем, у меня в бутовке еще что-то. Да? Кстати, Саня вот совершенно не разбирается в рыбалке.
Кстати, так же, как и ты.
The water shortage continues to set off alarms. But still, none of these engineers believe a serious accident is possible. For the top man, Nikolai Fomin, it's simply inconceivable.
Fomin had done a correspondence course of nuclear engineering, but he wasn't an expert in the field at all. He had risen mainly because of his standing as the party secretary. Unlike Dyatlov, who was aware that there were dangers in these reactors, Fomin believed everything he'd read. And so when the issue of safety arose, he'd say, well, the chances of an accident are completely remote, about as remote as you being hit by a meteorite.
Even the safety-conscious Alexander Akimov, who does understand the technology, has officially estimated the chances of an accident at Chernobyl as 1 in 10 million per year. But Akimov and his colleagues do not know the reactor as well as they think. They are the victims of years of cover-up and negligence.
Рабочими буднями стала для нас и одна из республиканских целевых программ «Энергокомплекс».
From the 1960s, the expansion of nuclear power has been a key target of the communist regime. Nothing has been allowed to get in the way. Not even the KGB. These recently released KGB documents show the authorities ignored repeated warnings between 1979 and 86 that Chernobyl had serious design flaws. Chernobyl's director, Viktor Bukhanov, and his senior managers rushed to get reactor number 4 open early so that they and their party bosses could win substantial bonuses. Safety came second.
Bukhanov, the director of the whole power station complex, was always at his wit's end to meet deadlines to build these reactors. For example, the roof of the reactors was meant to have been built with fireproof materials, but these fireproof materials didn't exist. The roof had to be put on, so he used combustible materials.
Accidents were common and hushed up. The very tests being done on this night should have been carried out before reactor number 4 was even opened. Now at Chernobyl, all these chickens are coming home to roost. Something deadly serious is happening in the reactor's core that no one in the control room is aware of. The few boron control rods still in the reactor are only partially inserted at the top. So power is building into a hotspot at the bottom of the core, where the sensors don't always see it. The reactor is now an invisible ticking time bomb.
Recovery.
"12 minutes past 1. The growing pressure inside Chernobyl's reactor number 4 is matched by the pressure within the man controlling the night's events. Deputy Chief Engineer Anatoly Dyatlov. Dyatlov remains determined to push through the safety test, despite the opposition in the control room.
Соберись.
One reason may be power station politics. Dyatlov is in trouble with the local Communist Party for being rude to his workers. His boss, Nikolai Fomin, is due for promotion. A successful test could help Dyatlov get Fomin's job and remove him from the engineers on the shop floor. But Dyatlov also holds a darker, more personal secret. Back in the 1960s, he'd worked in Siberia installing nuclear reactors into submarines.
There was a nuclear accident. The investigation found that it happened as a result of Dyatlov's actions, though it was not shown to be his fault. Dyatlov was exposed to 200 rem, 3 lifetimes worth of radiation.
Soon after the Siberian accident, Dyatlov's son died of leukemia, the most common disease children get from exposure to radiation. It is said the tragedy changed him, made him more driven, more willful. Tonight, his will is set against the very nuclear power that may have taken his child. 1:17 a.m. Less than 6 minutes to the start of the safety test. Dyatlov is confident.
На 200 мегаваттах расход воды небольшой. Мы сможем повторить испытания, если что.
До сих пор таких испытаний не проводили.
Мы проведем.
But the hotspot continues to build unseen at the bottom of the core.
Еще 2 минуты и все. Шевелитесь, шевелитесь.
Outside the control room, life and gossip carry on as normal.
Понимаешь, что Фомин делает на атомной электростанции? Он же обычно работал на обыкновенных электростанциях.
А, тогда ясно, почему он сказал, что управлять реактором так же просто, как электросамоваром.
Ты комара когда-нибудь видел?
Ну.
Когда представляешь, какой тонкой струйкой он мочится. Вот такой же толщины должна быть та ниточка, по которой нужно ходить, чтобы привести в партию. Ты думаешь, это у тебя получилось? Тогда, наверное, надо оставить эти разговоры. А то сибирские комары закрыты.
Да. Брось сигарету. Жена звонит.
Да? Да, хорошо, сейчас буду. Держи. Вернусь, докурю. Дятла вызывает срочно.
Смотри, чтоб дятел не закрыли.
А он так и заклюет.
Perovozhenko's route to the control room will lead him past the reactor.
Ну, ежели, наконец, все готовы, может, мы начнем испытание?
Запишите все параметры испытания турбогенератора. Мы начинаем.
Нет, Саш, что ты не прав. Детишки, это прекрасно.
Может, для тебя прекрасно, а для меня пока рано. Я пока об этом не думаю.
Зря. А мы вот думаем. Второго уж думаем.
Включить 2 резервных насоса.
Включить 2 резервных насоса.
Резервные насосы включены.
Хорошо. Ну что, Александр Федорович, начнем испытать.
The test will shut off the power to the massive turbines and let them coast. Backup diesel generators will take over, but there's a 40-second gap before they kick in. The question is how effectively the slowing turbines will keep the water pumps going until the diesel generators take over. Without that water, the reactor could boil dry like an immense kettle. But to Dyatlov, who continues to have no idea of the hotspot that has already built up, the risk remains purely theoretical. The power to the turbine is turned off. As the turbines wind down, the pumps push less water through the reactor core. More and more steam is generated from less and less water. Steam pressure builds at the core's invisible hotspot with every passing second. As the steam pressure rises, it spreads to the pump room. Perovozhenko enters the huge reactor hall directly above the reactor lid to see something never witnessed before. Steam pressure inside the core is lifting the 350 kilo caps to the fuel rods out of their sockets.
Произошел резкий скачок в мощности. Я включаю систему аварийного снижения мощности.
Pressing the emergency AZ5 button automatically lowers the boron control rods to reduce power. But it has an unforeseen and fatal effect.
The boron rods were in fact tipped with graphite, And that short moment when they are first inserted into the reactor, the graphite in fact leads to a surge in the power, not a reduction of power.
When the AZ5 button was pushed until the explosion, the power increased not 2- or 3-fold, it increased hundreds of times.
Акимов, что там у тебя? Акимов!
Это не у меня, Анатолий Степанович. Что происходит? Это у Столярчука.
Реактивность удваивается каждую секунду.
Это невозможно.
Уровень мощности превысил 530 мегаватт.
Наконечники срывает с крышки реактора. Ребята! Ребята! Люди!
Котик дома. Котику. Интересно. А кто играется с котиком? Никита играется.
Steam pressure at the reactor's hotspot can't be contained. 50 control and fuel rod shafts are torn apart. Power rockets, turning the whole reactor into a volcanic steam pressure cooker.
Що таке? Стріл? Вогонь такий, вогонь якийсь.
Куда делся свет?
Нет, что случилось?
Пропало питание!
Акимов,
Это
что?
нет, это у тебя опять! Что происходит?
Посмотри немедленно!
Куда смотри? Акимов, сбегай к Столярчуку! Куда энергия девалась?
Что случилось? Никто не знает.
Почему света? Скорее, 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 посмотрите все.
Посмотрите на пульт. Что показывают датчики?
After the first explosion, I thought the problem was a hydraulic blast in the diuretors. I wanted to try to switch the setting to compensate, but then the second explosion happened.
Seconds after the first blast, we heard the second, a massive explosion. I didn't know what it was. We only felt the blast wave. It smashed my door.
With the 500-ton safety cap blown off and air being sucked in below, the reactor becomes a giant blowtorch, blasting 50 tons of nuclear fuel into the atmosphere, 10 times Hiroshima. 700 tons of radioactive graphite are blown around the plant. Clouds of dust are sucked into the control room, accompanied by a strange smell. Gases released from the core leave a metallic taste, like ozone after a thunderstorm. It is, in fact, the stench of death. The dust is the cloak of the invisible killer of radiation. The control room operators are far enough away from the reactor core to survive the explosion. But some will wish they had not. Many will face days, weeks, even years of agony as radiation burns them to death from the inside.
What struck me was my wall. It's cast concrete, a meter thick. I saw the wall in the corner of my room bending, as if it was made from rubber, like this. It got dark immediately. The lights went out. Steam wrapped around everything. Dust. steam, darkness, and a horrible hissing noise.
Шипит все кругом.
Что это? Война, я пойду к себе на пост.
Я не знал, что произошло, да?
I thought it could be an earthquake, or maybe war. The reactor was the last thing on my mind.
Это был мой оператор, Виктор Дегтяренко.
That was my operator, Viktor Dektorenko. I only recognized him by his voice. You see, his face was burnt, all covered in blood.
То есть одежда была уже не белая, а, можно сказать, черная. Вот, а он мне сказал,
Victor was still in shock.
В шоке был, но...
But he said to me that he had been near the pumps together with Rusanovsky, the second pump operator, and that he stayed there, and I should help them. When I reached him, he was all shivery. You know, when a man is in shock? He just indicated with his hands and said, But what did I find? Ruins. That's all I saw. If he had been there, he would have been buried under the pillars. In place of the ceiling, there was only sky. A sky full of stars. At 3 a.m., I was vomiting at full strength. Those were the first signs of radiation sickness. And at 6 o'clock, I couldn't even go to the first aid station myself. They brought me there, put me in an ambulance, and took me to the medical station.
Sasha Yevchenko will survive. Others are dying. The radioactivity pours out of the reactor to be blown across Byelorussia towards the heart of Europe. The real nightmare is still to come. By the morning of April the 26th, the KGB was filming the devastated scene of the worst nuclear accident in history. Whoever shot this declassified KGB footage absorbed a massive dose of radiation. The next day, the people of Pripyat were officially told the worst.
Вечером следующего дня я уже
The following night I was taken to Moscow by plane. Doctors selected the first group. Only 5 persons survived from those who were on board. And my family was evacuated with the entire city.
It would take a full week for all 135,000 people to be evacuated. The radiation count was so high that flashes from it burned straight onto this film. A 30-kilometre zone of exclusion was declared, a zone frozen in time like a modern Pompeii. Over 600,000 Soviet men and women were brought in to contain the radioactivity. They worked in hellish, often chaotic conditions with extraordinary bravery in order to safeguard the rest of the world. Many of them had no protective clothing whatsoever. Everything they touched burned with radioactivity. The poisonous cloud spread beyond borders across much of the northern hemisphere. Washed into the earth by the rain, the radioactive dust lives on in plants, animals, and human beings. Within the Soviet Union, in the changing times of a new openness, the political effect was profound.
Все вы знаете, недавно нас постигла беда. Авария на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции.
I think in both a symbolic and a very real way, Chernobyl was the beginning of the end for the Soviet Union. I think in a symbolic way, the sort of meltdown, the explosion, was caused by all the inherent contradictions in the Soviet system, and therefore it's a very good paradigm, if you like, symbol of what was to happen.
Chernobyl's death toll, though horrifying, has turned out to be smaller than many first feared. The scientific consensus is that it will cause some 10,000 cancers in Russia and 25,000 worldwide over a 70-year period. As yet, the only proven rise in disease is in thyroid cancers in children. It is in individual human lives that the cost is most visible. The fishermen spent the night watching the firemen fight the radioactive blaze until they started to feel ill. Within hours, their skin went black, a nuclear tan that foreshadowed their deaths. "30 workers, including fire crew on the site, died from acute radiation poisoning.
А я думал, ты сегодня не на смене.
А я специально пораньше из Киева вернулся.
Ну что, продал машину?
Valery Kademchuk was vaporized in the explosion while at his post in the pump room. Valery Perevzhenko died 6 weeks later of radiation burns, suffered trying to find his friend Kademchuk. Alexander Akimov died 15 days after the explosion from radiation poisoning. As long as he could speak, he said, "I did everything right. I don't understand why it happened." Leonid Toptanov died 3 days after Akimov. He too protested his innocence to the grave, saying he'd done everything he could. The chief engineer of Chernobyl, Nikolai Fomin, was sentenced to 10 years hard labour, but was soon released due to a mental breakdown. He's now said to drift in and out of lucidity. Miraculously, Sasha Yevchenko survived, as did his wife Natasha and their son Kirill. But that night lives on in his memory and in his body.
I had 15 skin graft operations in the first year. The burns didn't show themselves at once. They came out here in Moscow, at the hospital. They ripened. When I was in the recovery unit, my skin was all black. When they pulled back my sheets, my skin peeled off like Xerox powder. Of course, I have to be careful now. For instance, I can drive a car, but I can't do any repairs. I can't touch petrol or oil. The wounds won't heal. The blood won't congeal properly. There are other things, but you get used to them. You just live with it. You have to.
Anatoly Dyatlov received a massive 390 rem of radiation. But even this 5 lifetimes worth of radiation didn't kill him. He lived on till 1995, when he died of a heart attack. Dyatlov served 4 years of his 10-year sentence, and in a remarkable interview given shortly before he died, he argued that in the battle between himself and the reactor, only one side could be blamed.
The reactor shouldn't have been in operation. The real blame lies with the Atomic Energy Authorities. Not having the correct documentation, when and where it was needed, made the explosion of the reactor inevitable. The reactor marched straight to its doom.
Paul Reynaud still wanted to resist.